So I'm going to change chips.
Shut off your cell phones if you have one. Please shut off your fancy cell phones. We will be getting started in about 5 minutes. Just wanted to let you know, just out of respect for our guests, kindly shut off the cell phones. Thank you very much.
Sure. Let's see if we can go more. there people are in other rooms? Is there another panel going on?
No, not that I know of. They're here for now. Maybe after this they break into panels.
I'm like, Sean, yeah, no.
Yeah, I know. I think
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is just a second announcement. For those of you who just joined us, please make sure that your cell phones are turned off. Please make sure that your cell phones are turned off. Thank you. We're going to get started in 2 seconds. Thank you.
So you're coming from Connecticut?
Yeah. morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning.
Good morning. If you use your microphone.
Let me double check it's on. Thank you. It is a great honor today that I introduce to you all Her Excellency Ambassador Amina Saloum Ali as the African Union Ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Ali speaks on behalf of the African Union and its member states on its strategies to accelerate socio-economic integration of the continent, promote peace, and build partnerships between African governments and the civil societies they serve. Her Excellency will echo today in her message the fundamental ideas that are embedded in her passion for Africa and engraved in her conviction for a brighter future for the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Her Excellency Ambassador Amina Saloum Ali.
Thank you very much. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here. As an African Union ambassador, there is nothing more important for me than to address a gathering of students and experts from prestigious university in the US. Columbia University continues to occupy an important position as an institution of higher learning in America and contribute positively in preparing the future leaders not only for America, but also for Africa and for the world. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be with you this morning. Over the last 2 decades, the traditional role of diplomacy in general, and that of an ambassador in particular, has changed. These days, a primary preoccupation of an ambassador is economic diplomacy. I'm not saying that we no longer deal with political issues, but the main focus among other priority areas is on promoting economic issues for our countries and institutions in what is popularly known as economic diplomacy. We at the AU will try to complement what our ambassadors of bilateral countries do to support and complement their efforts in promoting trade investment opportunities for Africa in the US. Let me take this opportunity to thank the President, the faculty, and the entire team of Columbia University 9th Annual African Economic Forum for granting me a platform to share the success story of African Renaissance and the contributing factor to the success, as well as the challenges, threats, and opportunities that confront Africa. My intention today is to give a brief outline of the African Development Agenda and the role that African Union Commission is playing in moving forward the African agenda. I want to take this opportunity to share with you recent development in Africa. As a continent, Africa has undergone significant economic and political transformation over the last 2 decades, and especially since 2000. Average GDP growth in Africa has ranged between 6 to 7% over the last decade. This is a huge jump compared to less than 2% average for the previous decade, 3 decades since our independence. For some countries, the growth rate has actually been in double digits and have made a steady gain in economic development because they successfully managed to transform the economy into an open market economy that facilitates foreign direct investment in the recent years. Despite the achievement of this milestone by some African countries, poverty still remains Africa's great challenge. Africa has not yet successfully managed to change the social dimension in the continent, although our social indicators show much improvement. This growth has been widespread across countries and sectors. 27 out of 30 largest economies in Africa have been expanding more rapidly over the last decade. In fact, according to The Economist, 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world are from Africa. Sector-wise, the growth in Africa comes from a wide variety of sectors, including natural resources, finance, retail business, agriculture, transportation, telecommunications, and other sectors. With a collective GDP of $1.7 trillion, it is expected to reach $2.6 trillion in less than 10 years' time. This is according to McKinsey report, calling Africa a lion rising from the savannah. Africa's economy is now comparable to that of Russia or Brazil. Speaking of Russia and Brazil, it is important to point out that a good number of African countries score better than most of the BRICS in terms of doing business. According to the 2009 Doing Business ranking by World Bank, it's only China to the 4 of BRICS that does better than selected African countries like Rwanda, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Ghana, and others. The 2011 Doing Business report actually has 3 African countries on its list of top 10 improved economies in the world. In 2009, Rwanda was the #1, the top performer. So those who find it easier to do business in India, Brazil, or Russia should have no reason not to do business in Africa. Africa also is becoming a very important marketplace, with its middle class growing significantly. Some studies indicate that a combined spend in the middle class in Africa is about $1 trillion. Africa offers enormous business opportunity for those interested to expand their market base. In a nutshell, Africa's economic growth, coupled with attractive business environment, is creating substantial new business opportunities with unparalleled returns on investment. There are serious studies out there that indicate that return on investment in Africa are higher than any other region in the world. Some studies even managed to show annual return in Africa could go as high as 80 to 150%. If the potential investors are interested in not just making money, but making good with their money, Africa is their new destination. It also offers opportunity for a double bottom line of the population, as investment in Africa will have significant impact in improving the lives of millions of Africans. Our mission, African Union mission, in a nutshell, is to advocate, inform, attract U.S. investors to think positively about Africa and its potential. As you can imagine, it's not an easy task. For decades, Africa was not on investors' radar. The stereotypical image of Africa is a continent of despair and hopelessness was so pervasive, completely overshadowing any positive development in Africa during the last decade. The structure of trade in many African countries comprised of export, mainly of primary products. More than 80% of export earnings in most African countries are derived from export of primary commodities. The share of manufactured exports rose by 3% from 28% in 1995 to 31% in 2009. But most of the manufacturers are resource-based and domestic value added is very low. They register limited productivity gains and also show few linkages with the rest of the economy. Africa was responsible for just 1.3% of global manufactured exports in 2008, against 1% in 2000. Moreover, the composition of Africa's import is heavily weighted in favor of a wide variety of manufactured goods from developed countries and the recent trend from China and other members of BRICS. Additionally, more than 80% of Africa's total export, almost invariably primary commodities, are destined for Europe, Asia, and America, while a comparable percentage of the continent's import needs, usually of manufactured goods, are obtained from the same markets. In order for Africa to realize economic development through trade and investment, it must shift from being an exporter of primary commodities and diversify the structure of its production base. Africa needs to pursue policies of economic diversification and to move toward increasing manufacturing capacity by investing in the production value chain in different sectors in the economy. This is why several efforts are undertaken to ensure regional integration are currently underway. An integrated sub-regional continental market offers Africa the best hope for large-scale manufacturing viability. With the population dividend that Africa is enjoying right now, that's created a viable market for increased manufacturing base and potential for export to the global markets. The intra-African trade will stimulate economic growth by 25%. Obviously, we are trading, or economic trading between African countries, we are trading among ourselves to the tune of less than 20%, while other regions, their own internal trade is more than 25%. Some countries like Asia is almost 45% to 50%. Moreover, efforts in building sustainable physical infrastructure are underway to eradicate non-tariff trade barriers for the facilitation of free movement of goods, people, capital, and information. The ultimate goal for ensuring economic development for Africa through trade is the creation of the economic market and the common market and monetary union by harmonizing African monetary and fiscal policy with the ultimate realization of the African Union vision of an African economic community. Once these measures are implemented, the expanded market of over 1 billion population with estimated GDP to reach $2.6 trillion by 2020, that will emerge is likely to offer better incentives for investors to invest in a more and bigger continental free trade area. Regional integration has been a major focus of the African countries since the establishment of the then Organization of African Unity, or AU. The vision of the AU at that time was to create an integrated and united Africa. Therefore, African countries made a number of declarations from 1963 Charter Resolution to move the integration agenda forward. The landmark decision was taken during the meeting in Nigeria that came out of the Lagos Plan of Action and the Abuja Treaty signed in 1993 that created the roadmap for the implementation of the integration agenda in Africa. The Abuja Treaty stipulated an endeavor to strengthen regional economic communities as a building block toward integrated Africa. Regional economic communities were mandated to harmonize and progressively integrating their activities to attain the African economic community. The concept and the philosophy behind the decision of the African economic community was to enable African countries to be fully integrated as one economic bloc within a 34-year period. From its inception, the African economic community was envisaged to be a gradual undertaking to pass through 6 stages. Currently, the African economic community has already reached the 3rd stage of the process, which calls for creation of free trade areas, FTA, and custom union in each of the regional blocks by 2017. Currently, the current progress of both free trade area and custom union varies from region to region in the context of the 8 regional economic communities that are recognized by African Union. As I said, we have recognized regional economic communities, 8 in Africa, and the stages, they have already reached different stages of implementing the decision to reach African economic community. While in ECOWAS and ECAS, they are now about to finalize the custom union and free trade area. They are working toward that. While COMESA and the small community, they've already, especially small community, they've already passed the custom union, and now they're talking about to create free trade area under the tripartite free trade area arrangement. And of course, Central Africa and then the northern Maghreb, they still have to really move ahead to be able to reach 2017 decision. Therefore, there's a positive development towards reaching the objective of an African economic community, as envisaged by the Abuja Treaty and Lagos Plan of Action. Recently, the Southern and East African Regional Economic Community took a decision to sign a tripartite trade agreement with the objective to strengthen and deepening economic integration of the sub-region under 3 regional economic communities. That is COMESA, Eastern Community, and SADC. These 3 regional communities declare the intention of creating a free trade area that will encompass 26 countries as a trade bloc. It's a big opportunity, and also it's going to open the market of those countries, 26 countries, and it will also facilitate business among these 26 countries. And it will also stimulate economic growth, because once you have a free trade area, it will be easier for investors to come and invest in that trade bloc, and also to trade among themselves. African Union, in its January summit, selected a theme of boosting intra-African trade and took a decision to have a roadmap for implementation of the continental free trade area by 2017. This will be the way forward toward the envisaged African Economic Community. The head of state and government have created a high-level committee to spearhead the implementation of the continental free trade area by 2017. This will be in line with the decision of creating a united Africa and enabling free movement of goods, people, capital, and information. There are several challenges in implementing the continental free trade area, and the challenges that really confront Africa towards the African development agenda. Major challenges in the physical infrastructure. The need for infrastructure development in Africa is very high, and the investment required is huge. It is estimated to require annually 95 billion US dollars. This is where the NEPAD, ADB, with the support of African Union and UNECA, have come out with a program called PIDA. It's a program for infrastructure development in Africa. The African heads of state and government adopted a declaration in Kampala to support the infrastructure program for Africa. So PIDA is a program which is adopted and supported by all member countries, and also by our own regional institution, NEPAD, ADB, African Union, and UN Economic Commission for Africa. The PIDA program designed in recognition of the need for development in Africa, both long-term and short-term, in different sectors of the economy. And the PIDA program, when it was formulated, it took into consideration the energy requirement for Africa by 2040 that will rise to nearly 6%. Installed capacity for power generation will need to rise from 125 gigawatts to 700 gigawatts in 2040. Transport need also need to increase by 6 to 8 times, and especially for landlocked countries to increase up to 14 times. For example, port throughput to rise from 265 million tons in 2009 to more than 2 billion tons by 2040. At the same time, water requirement will push the rise to rise to its maximum use by 2040. That means all of our water, our rivers and waterways will be required to be utilized to be able to really satisfy the requirement of our development by 2040. ICT demands will also expand with advance in technology and the need to serve the economy by 2040. Therefore, with PIDA, there are 51 projects and programs, 15 in energy sector, 24 in the transport sector, 9 in transboundary, water transboundary, and 3 in ICT. Let me give an example of energy. In terms of energy, there are programs and projects for regional power pools, in transport for corridor modernization, and also African highway projects. And in ICT, ICT, in internet and then interconnection, infrastructure, and many more projects designed to be able to support the economic development of Africa in the long-term period. Other challenges confronting Africa is in the area of food security and agricultural development. Africa has an untapped potential for food security to feed her own population and also to be the breadbasket for the world. Africa's share of the world's total amount of uncultivated arable land is around 60%. African Union has spearheaded the CADA program for African countries to stimulate agriculture development in Africa and also to attain food security. For the last 2 to 3 years, with the right agricultural policies and the CADA implementation, some countries in Africa have attained high surplus in food crops, and some managed to provide food support for other food deficit countries in Africa. But the underlying transport bottleneck created an artificial deficiency in some countries and difficulties in cost of distribution food grains to the needy countries in Africa. That's why you find there was famine in one part of Africa and there was surplus in food production in some other countries in Africa, but the problem of transport bottleneck has caused a problem to be able to distribute the food surplus from one region to the other, and also that created the cost of food in some parts of Africa. Another challenge is in the area of peace and security. Peace and security is also essential in providing conducive environment for economic development and growth in Africa. Africa has passed through a difficult phase during the last decades due to conflict in many countries in Africa. Although we still have conflict in some areas, but we find that the conflict that we used to have before, like 17 years ago, it has really reduced. With the African Union peace and security architecture, we have seen sustainable peace in many countries in Africa that led towards high economic growth and development. The ratification of the African Charter on Election and Democracy will usher in another period of peace and security in Africa. This is because we have seen recently one of the causes of conflict is transition from one government to the other, especially during the democratic process, especially during the election. So African Union have adopted a charter, African Charter on Election and Democracy, and I'm happy to inform you that this charter, African countries have ratified this charter, and now this charter is already effective in Africa. And we believe we are going to see a little bit sort of reduction in terms of election dispute, and also in terms of reconciliation and peace building, especially after the conflict that arises because of election disputes. The transnational issues also will continue to pose a threat in development in some of the regions in Africa. Transnational issues are like terrorism. You know, some parts of Africa really have challenges in terrorism, especially in the west part of Africa and in the Sahara, as well as in the Horn of Africa. Drug trafficking, we are seeing escalation of drug trafficking, and it's also threatened the political system in some of the government in some part of Africa. Also, distribution of small arms and weapons, especially after the recent conflict in Libya, pose threat in some part of Africa. These are the source of conflict in some of the region in Africa, and we believe some of the region are being destabilized because of this sort of cause, transnational issues. The issue that really face region, not country, but the bigger region. Opportunities and the strength of African countries are due to the demand for the abundant resource that Africa is endowed with. Africa is very rich in terms of resources, and of course both mineral resources and other type of resources. And we have been exporting these resources to mostly nowadays to China and some of the developing countries. And this is an opportunity, and it's also a wake-up call for African countries to really look inward and to start asking, to start thinking of processing and create value addition for this sort of resources that we are exporting in form of in the form of like the raw material. At the same time, the shift in economic policies and the challenges that confront the developed world, the change in the emergence of the BRICS and the new economic power bloc gave tremendous opportunity to African countries. What is required is to have a long-term strategic plan to exploit the opportunities that emerge in the present global realities. As you know, the global reality is that now we have a new sort of economic power that has emerged, which is, of course, BRICS. And you have heard recently they had a meeting in India. They came out with a very transformative declaration that really will also impact on Africa. That means this is an opportunity for Africa now to look inward and really to have a strategic sort of policy to enable us to really develop our economy and also take advantage of the economic potential of this place. The African diaspora is estimated to reach over 400 million globally. And it's also another strong point for African development. It was estimated that the remittance alone from diaspora surpassed the ODA from partners countries. For 2009 alone, the remittance reached over $40 billion. Therefore, the diaspora is properly organized and empowered, could play a major role in economic development for Africa. Africa is now exploring plans towards Africa of the 2050. As Africa is a global pole. Let me end by giving a challenge to you to reflect on Africa in 2050, the making of a global pole. Nowadays, in all the corridor of power in Africa, everybody is talking about what do we do to be able to enable, to take opportunity, to seize the momentum, so that within up to 2050, Africa could be the new global pole. Because we have seen another global pole, which is China and Brazil and Russia and India. But we believe this decade, up to 2050, if really we put all of our effort and plan our economy in such a way that will enable Africa to be a global pole, we can really make a difference. So I want to end my remarks by saying, what can we do, we as intellectuals, so that Africa in 2050 can be the next global pole? Thank you for your attention.
We'll now be taking questions.